I'm so irritated because TikTok is playing games with me and I really just want to wash my face and go to bed. But I shot some audition tapes for a movie today and the makeup looks good. It looked too good to waste it, okay? So I figured I would jump on here and just talk about something that I've been meaning to talk about for weeks and weeks, and that is whiteness is a bribe. This is for everyone, but I'm specifically talking about European Americans who make less than 75 grand a year because that's honestly who's impacted the most by the value loss of whiteness. Let me back it up. In 1850, 70% of white people in the South were not enslavers. 90% of white people all over the country were not enslavers, but y'all participated in enslaving others because you took the bribe. In 1850, when they passed the Fugitive Slave Act, they basically drafted white people into a racial stratification war. For those of you who don't know, the most basic explanation of the Fugitive Slave Act was that the people in the South wanted to recapture their enslaved humans who had escaped to the North, and so they passed a law that allowed them to do that. So under the Fugitive Slave Act, U.S. Marshals were allowed to deputize literally anyone in any town they were in. And once they were deputized, they became part of a posse comitatus. Now, the posse comitatus was kind of a good deal for white people, but it also was not, because you got paid $5 to be on the posse, which was $200 of purchasing power in today's money. The marshals got paid $10 for being in the posse. They got paid $10 upon return of a fugitive, and they got paid $5 whether they returned a fugitive at all. So, put that in today's money, $400 and $200. Now, personally, for me, $200 is not enough to make me go pursue a human, but honestly, they really did not have a choice because one side was the incentives and the other side was the consequences. Now, if you are a marshal and you refuse to execute a writ, you refuse to go pursue an enslaved human being, they could charge you $1,000. Not $1,000 in today's money, $1,000 in 1850 money, which equates to 40 grand. If you were a regular citizen and you didn't want to participate in a posse comitatus, they could charge you $1,000. So again, you're getting a 40 grand bill. If you were a marshal and you let an enslaved person escape, you were fined $1,000 per escapee. Descriptions of black people were vague at best, and like they didn't have social media, so it wasn't like they could say this girl. They had to go with a very vague description. So the enslaver would basically like go to any court he wanted to and say, let's use me as an example. I have a girl, Asia, and she ran away and I'm trying to get her back. And she is, I don't know, cafe au lait color with nappy hair. That was enough of a description according to the court of law. So with marshals being put in this position where they were literally going to be fined $40,000 if somebody got away from them, but they can make $400 if they brought somebody, what do you think they did? And this is how random black people from all over the country got abducted, kind of like in 12 Years a Slave, and kind of like how random black people from all over the country are getting murdered by police simply because they fit the description. And the main description was blackity black, black, black. Now, in addition to fiscal incentives and consequences, whiteness also kind of functioned like a gang. So if you did not participate in or endorse whiteness, you were putting yourself and your family at risk because they won't say you was an end lover, which could end you up on the wrong end of a lynching. There have been a lot of documented cases of preachers who had moral objections to enslavement, who came to the wrong city to give a sermon and they ran them out of there with shotguns. Preachers! I can't even. But I mean, honestly, whiteness still functions pretty much in this way today. It's just not as valuable to white people anymore. You guys are not being incentivized in any way to participate in this system, What you are doing is screwing yourself over as you screw us over because you continue to take the bribe of whiteness. White men who were not part of the exploiter class, they were never going to let you in. It was not built for you. That door was locked to you. But what they gave you instead was an opportunity to stand in the waiting room of whiteness. Never mind that you were going to be in there all day. You just stand there and feel good about yourself. Coal miners in Appalachia were paid crap pay to do terrible jobs because the people working next to them were enslaved black people who had no money, who had been enslaved through convict leasing. So free labor means cheap labor for everyone else. Cattle ranchers were not paid fairly for their work, but they were told, hey, at least you're not a cowboy. We're paying them even less. Factory girls were losing fingers making clothing for rich people, but hey, at least they weren't feeding someone's baby or washing up after them, cooking or cleaning, because those were the only jobs available to black women. So you white woman losing a finger, you should feel lucky. You white men working in the coal mine, you should feel lucky. You poor European immigrants getting paid migrant labor wages on a farm, you should feel lucky because you're not a sharecropper who doesn't get paid anything. Indebted to a company town? Lucky. Unable to read and write? Don't you worry about it. You're white, so you're lucky. Meanwhile, y'all wouldn't even have public schools if it wasn't for the black people that got in Congress during Reconstruction, but we're not going to talk about that because that's the subject for another video. So really think about this. Think about this as an example. The grandfather clause. The grandfather clause was you could vote if your grandparents voted. And so, like, the thing about it was, of course, if you were black, your grandparents didn't vote because your grandparents were on a plantation. But if you were white and your grandparents voted, then you were still allowed to vote, whether or not you could read your ballot. Now, the exploiter class could have said, hey, we want an educated electorate. So we're going to make sure every white person in America can read. But they didn't. Instead of doing that, they were like, hey, you're white. You should feel lucky about it. It's okay if you're poor. It's okay if you can't read. It's okay if you're not making enough to feed your family because your basis of superiority is whiteness. Now, back in the day, I mean, it was real. Like, it was life or death, right? It was life or death to adhere to the rules of the gang of whiteness. But now, it's not. And y'all still doing it. See, what Euro-descended Americans need to understand today is that the top maintains itself at the top by maintaining the bottom as the bottom. And the bottom is black people. If you really want to get specific and granulated, the bottom is disabled black trans women, which honestly, they're who should be running the country. But again, another comment. You know who's most likely to be on welfare in this country? White single moms. But that's not the perception of welfare. The perception of welfare is that it goes to the undeserving poor, which, I mean, that's pretty much, black people are always considered the undeserving poor. So because of that, your problematic faves are passing laws that require people who cannot afford to feed their family to volunteer for 20 hours a week to continue to get enough money to not afford to feed their family. And y'all are allowing this because you think it mainly impacts black people. Police kill black people disproportionately, but they out here killing white folks too. They're killing white children. And y'all don't pay any attention to that because you think it's an issue that mainly impacts black people. There's a gendered racial pay gap. White women, where y'all at? Y'all are concerned about your 70 cents, but you're not concerned about Latina woman's 50 cents? Hey, if we closed the racial gender wealth gap, maybe we could close the wealth gap and the racial gap. Like, we do not have to have these problems, but we have these problems because people have been convinced that whiteness is more valuable than liberty. Figure it out.